Go. So, welcome to Light on the Horizon, Fridays for Earth. This is a webinar series that we're doing right now. Okay, now I'm Jen and Dave. Are you guys still there? We're still recording. And can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry, love.
Okay, it's all right. So, this is a webinar series based on the spiritual psychological principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, first articulated by a ninth grade educated welder named Sydney Banks, who has passed on. And we encourage everyone to go look at all his books and find them online and take a dive into the principles world online or in printed form. And we won't get too into the principles today because we did cover that on the last webinar. And now we have a YouTube channel called Light on the Horizon. And I think it might be called Light on the Horizon Fridays if you need to narrow your search down. And that's really a wonderful thing because now the videos are available to people who can't make it, you know, at 5 o'clock on a Friday or 9 a.m. in my case, or 5 or 2 o'clock in the morning in other countries. um, and also one of the reasons that I wanted to start this at any rate is because Greta has called for strikes on Fridays. And my sense of the crisis, having done a lot of research into it now, is that we're at that point. We just simply can't continue with business as usual. We just can't. So whether that's taking the day off from work or going to go out and do an action, or whether it's simply giving yourself a little space and time today for your mental health and accessing your own deeper well-being, your own deeper wisdom about what to do or what not to do at this time. That's one of the reasons we started this on Fridays, to support the children who are striking. And maybe that's not possible for us right now, but it is possible to join on the webinar. And perhaps it's possible, you know, to not drive today, or to not eat beef today, or to not eat lamb or any meat today, or to, you know, try a coconut yogurt. Like, this is what's happening in my life. It's, you know, I feel like we don't have to tell people what to do as much as people get tuned into the information, they naturally shift their behaviors. It just makes sense all of a sudden. And some people will come along more slowly, and that's not, like, it's not my business, you know. My business is to just share the information. So this webinar is about finding our right action at this time. And we absolutely have no rules about what that right action looks like. And so our job here is to really help you get really comfortable and grounded in what feels right for you. And honestly, it may be nothing. Like, it may be, oh, I just want to watch this webinar and maybe watch another one until I figure it out, or until it occurs to me. And that's totally cool. Like, we're not saying you have to do anything. I also wanted to quickly just follow up on our last two webinars, because I spoke about going to my spiritual center and being very upset one day and feeling like I didn't have a place to go with my emotions around the climate crisis. I was like distraught. I was in tears. I was crying, and I ended up sitting with my spiritual director there. And this is a very sort of principles-based church. It's called the Center for Spiritual Living. I think it's international, but we have one here in Santa Cruz. And I want to follow up with, after that conversation on our first webinar, one of the board members from the Center for Spiritual Living was on it, and also our spiritual director was on it, on that webinar. And since then, they've started moving around different actions and sort of putting their toe into both political actions in the United States and also climate crisis actions. So So there's a story unfolding here on these webinars of change and what happens when we start to just step into our roles. We don't know, but it's, for me here in Santa Cruz, it's been a total surprise, and it's actually been quite joyful in a way, you know. So I'm going to hand it over to these two, Jenny and Dave, and I don't know if you want to let people introduce themselves or feel like it's too many, but there are some new people here that I don't know, and I'll just leave it up to you.
It'd be quite nice to hear from the new people, wouldn't it? The new people. Who is the here that actually wants to admit that they're new here? Who is the here that's new and would just like to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Richard Edelman. I'm in Bodega, California.
Hi, Richard. What brings you here, Richard?
Well, I'm quite acutely aware of what's happening with the biosphere, and have actually been for quite some time, and have done quite a bit of deep spiritual work for a long time as well. And so interested in connecting and learning more.
Nice. Thanks, Richard. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello.
Christian?
I'm new. Yeah, so I'm Christian. I'm a friend of Dave and Jen's, and we share the three P's understanding together. And just after having coffee with them today, I was asking what this was about, and I'm just curious, really, to know what you're up to and what you're chatting about, really.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you.
I can step in if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
I've been part of the principals community for quite a while. Jenny, one of your videos from a long time ago was the one that the penny dropped, and I burst out laughing, of course, because that's what we do. I also am an artist, and I recently, there's one of my favorite artists who has been doing traditional art for a long time, just came out with a book. He's a landscape artist, and he was saying, my heart is breaking because as a landscape artist, I don't know how much longer we're going to have a landscape. So he wrote this amazing book, Apocalypse Variations is the name of it. But anyway, it has some very dramatic artwork that gets to the heart as opposed to the intellect of climate crisis. And it shook me. And then to have this come on right after, it's just delicious mind synchronicity. So I'm here seriously having a wonderful time listening.
That's beautiful, Bobby. And I think what you speak to there is that's what this is about. That's why when Amy and Jenny and I and Chantal got together and we had this, Amy contacted Jen, and Jen said, well, Dave's passionate about the environment and he's big into his ecology. Well, these were born from that conversation that Jen and Amy had. And this is what we want to do. We want to get to the heart. Let's get to the heart of the climate, environmental goings on. Let's get to the heart. And those people who are new to the three principles ultimately offer words to the nature of reality, to the nature of our lives on a day-to-day basis, and they help us wake up within ourselves to a recognition of truth. So effectively, all of the world's problems and all our personal problems stem from a psychological misunderstanding, which is based in a spiritual disconnection. And so to start to awaken the spiritual within ourselves, the problems that the world is facing will start to diminish. And this is, it seems like it can almost be like yeah, so what, why the hell are we talking about this? You know, this world's going to shit. Why are we talking about this? It's collapsing, the ecology is collapsing. The world's warming. There's all these problems in the world. Why are we talking about psychology? Why are we talking about spirituality? Let's get to the heart of the problem. Well, the heart of the problem lies in our spiritual disconnection and the psychology that is born of that, the ego that is born of that. And I know for myself, I mean, I have been passionate about the environment, and I've spoken about this in previous of these calls, that I've spent months of sleepless nights worrying about the environment, worrying about the future, worrying about the ecology, the collapse of the ecosystems and the rainforests, and what it means for my lifetime, what it means for the lifetime of every other living being. Because there's a species on this planet that has disconnected itself, has separated itself from the whole. It no longer recognizes itself as nature. It sees itself as a separate entity that is on top, in charge of, in control of the rest of all the other organisms that ultimately sustain its own presence on the planet. So, did you?
I was just going to say, I didn't know if anyone else wanted to introduce themselves as well.
Okay.
There wasn't someone had unmuted themselves, so I just wanted to check. I think it was Nancy. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I'm also in Santa Cruz, California, and I've been profoundly moved over the years by what the three principles can accomplish in people's lives and in healing communities and creating the kinds of transformations that are probably the only way out of the being on the verge of extinction. If there's a way out, this is Paul Hawken says of climate change, maybe it's not happening to us, maybe it's happening for us. It's opening up a new opportunity to rediscover the truths we're talking about today. So I'm glad that this focus is here, and very grateful, Amy, for you starting it. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. That's beautiful. So, if we're really going to start to look at how the world works, and ultimately the ultimate cause of whatever is happening to the planet from a human point of view, caused by humanity, we have to start to look at the building blocks. Let's take a look at the building blocks, and that's what these conversations are about. They're a conversation about why is the world looking as it does, and then what can we do about it. And the collective coming together of people is to throw around ideas. And there's been a couple of people just before we went live. Amy was one of them, and sorry, I think it was Sian was speaking about some beautiful things that have just happened for the environment in their area.
No, it's Bobby.
Bobby, was it? Sorry. But when we start to wake up and we start to get a sense beyond our ego of what we truly are, it does some really beautifully magical things for an individual. On a personal level for myself, it took me from a state of depression, anxiety and suicidal to the most beautiful joy and unconditional love that I'd ever experienced in my life. And it was that recognition that is at the heart of every single being. That is at the heart of all experience. We get so lost in our ego. We get so lost in our creations of ideas of who we think we are, what we think we need in order to be okay, and who we think we should be and who we think other people should be. But it doesn't matter whether it's the CEO of Exxon or it's the CEO of World Wildlife Fund. At the end of the day, they are human beings who are living an experiential happening through their own consciousness. They do what makes sense to them, given the way that they think. And that's where this spiritual understanding starts to come in. It's starting to get a recognition of the spirit The true spiritual nature of ourselves isn't something that is separate from ourselves that can be attained. It's truly what we already are. We are conscious, thinking beings. We are all one phenomenal energy that is taking form, is walking around on the planet and living out of the ideas that make sense to us. And the reason why we believe, or I've got to speak for myself, I personally believe that the three principles, as they are called, is fundamental to this conversation, is because when people start to wake up within themselves, they recognize themselves within others. They recognize the energy of the consciousness state that they are within other people, but not just other people, within all living beings. They realize that consciousness isn't a thing that is a personal thing, it is a happening of all life. So one of the things that we've noticed within people is they have started to wake up within themselves and started to recognize this spiritual essence. This thing that people go in search of, but it's already there. The thing that we're already looking for, we already are. When people start to get a sense of that, dramatic change is happening in an individual. And for ourselves, I mean, one of the things that we've noticed is our requirement of things in order to feel peaceful, in order to feel happy, in order to feel fulfilled in life. We understand that those feelings are not created by an abundance of things in the world that we acquire, or the acquisition of more money or status or power, but those feeling states that ultimately everybody's looking for, this contentment, this fulfillment in life, this excitement, this vibrance in life, is ultimately at the core of our very being. You ask people, you know, what are the most beautiful times of your life? Very few people who own a Range Rover would say, well, the time I bought a Range Rover was the most beautiful time of my life. They would talk about some time when they were so deeply connected with one another, or they were at some family happening, or somebody was born when love was present. And those are things that can't be bought. That feeling is something that can't be bought. But it's what we are. Behind the nonsense and the noise of our running riot and trying to decipher what's going on and making up stories about one another and ourselves, there is this beauty there. And this beauty is the thing that is going to be the healer. This is the true healer of all life. This is the true healer of our own life personally, and then it goes out into the world. As we become more balanced and capable and powerful within our own lives, more resilient, some people like to use the word resilient. You cannot be broken psychologically. You cannot be hurt psychologically. When people start to wake up to this, their consumption diminishes. It's the strangest of things. We notice that within people who truly start to get a sense of this, very simple things start to take place. They require less from life. They don't need to upgrade things. They don't need the brand new this, the brand new that. The things that we perhaps once thought were the most important thing in the world to show that we're doing well in life, we realize that no, doing well in life is simply existing. That's doing well in life. Life itself is doing well. That is what life is. And so one of the things that we talked about yesterday before we had this call was how when people start to get a sense of this understanding, they require less. They require less holidays. They don't need to travel as far in order to feel peaceful in life. They realize that their peace of mind resides with them wherever they are. It might not always show up, but it's always there behind whatever mental noise is going on. People will travel less. People consume less. People make different decisions when it comes to what kind of food do I want to buy. People become very much more awakened to others. Connected. And this is the beautiful thing. Once people start to find this connection within themselves, they connect to life. And so this connection to life is the thing that is going to be the thing that changes this world. this is the thing that's going to change psychology. It's also going to be the thing that changes the way that we treat the environment, our consumption. When people start to recognize the fulfillment in life, their aspirations start to diminish. It's not that I'm not saying don't have goals or have ambition in life. I'm not saying anything like that. But we become more content with exactly where we are. We need less from life in order to feel good. We don't feel the need to go out and earn loads of money, because money isn't the thing that creates our experience of life. Our experience of money is a consciousness happening. It's whatever we think about it. So this is ultimately, when I first came across the principles, I knew it would be the thing that changed the world. Not the principles, not the 3 words, but what they're truly pointing to within the heart of every single person. There's this untouchable, unbreakable beauty within each and every one of us that is connected to something so magnificent, nobody can put it into words. And when people start to get glimpses of that, the hearts open. And when people's hearts open, they naturally want to help. They naturally want to connect. They naturally want to do the best to help all life thrive. And I'm really thankful that this conversation's been opened up. It's been something that I have been thinking about for a long time. So again, thank you everybody for joining on. And thank you, Amy and Jen, for sorting it out.
Thank you. That was really nice listening to you. And I think one of the things that I loved at the beginning, hearing Amy and also Bobby just mention that out of these calls, things are starting to happen and people are starting to make different choices, and like we have no idea where this might lead. And when Bobby said, you know, she watched a video of me and that was when the penny dropped with the principles, it's like, who knows what pennies might drop when people watch these recordings and are part of these conversations. And I think to know that the gifts within consciousness and the gifts within insight that any one of us can have can help create a more beautiful world for us to live in. I feel really inspired to be part of these. And I've just seen that Chantal's joined as well. So hi, Chantal. You've got detention.
Detention.
I'd really love it if we can open it up and take questions and hear from people, because I think the last few have been kind of laying the foundations. But I feel like this is a conversation that we want to have with people. We don't want it to just be a presentation. So I don't know if Amy or Chantal have something to add, but I would love to open it up to discussion and questions.
I'm happy to open it to discussion and questions, and I just want to frame that a little bit in terms of kind of like coming down to earth from the beautiful feeling of listening to the principles. And then, you know, the topic, which is finding our right action. Like if people are struggling with what should I be doing? Maybe I'm not feeling like doing a lot right now. Is that a problem? Should I feel guilty about that? Or, hey, I'm like ready to go out and, you know, glue myself to a truck or whatever. Like, you know, the range is quite open. And so I just wanted to kind of reframe it before we go into questions. And I've been super active myself, and it's been a really interesting experience. And so I'm happy to answer questions about what happened for me when I, you know, sort of tapped into my own juice around all of this. And that's all I want to say. We can open it up, or maybe Chantal has a couple of words.
No, I just want to say hi to everybody.
So anyone want to begin with a question, or was there something that drew you to this webinar that it's something sort of burning inside of you, you know, where you saw the topic and thought, oh, I need help with that, or a place of struggle, or a place of insight that you'd like to share about, you know, we've got a lot going on in this world. Certainly in this country, we are, you know, in a bit of a panic, some of us, about what's happening here. And so that you know, what do we do with that, looking at that, all of that, and not being in an internal actually state of panic at the same time.
In the group last night we had with Dave, I was talking to Jen about consciousness, and I think you can't. I've been getting quite lately annoyed with people for not having the awareness of what's going on. But you can't, I think Jen always says you can't know what you know until you know it. And like I was reading a news article last night after group about these bags and these deers in Japan. They found they're eating plastic bags. And on the news lately, it's been so much about kind of plastic in the oceans. You forget about the plastics on the ground because no one's really, and that kind of shifted my awareness. And it's like, oh yeah, like mammals and land mammals are being affected by the pollution as well. So even my blind spot to like kind of consciousness and awareness wasn't there. So, and it's like kind of not beating myself up for feeling guilty and not knowing what's going on, or feeling bad for what's going on in the world and having no power to control it.
One of the foundational principles of Extinction Rebellion, which I'm involved with, is no shame, no blame. And that's been so crucial. I mean, I can see that just moving forward across the board for all movements is, I think when people feel like they might get shamed or blamed for not knowing something ahead of them knowing it, you know, they're not going to want to get involved in that group. You know, I mean, I still have a minivan, and, you know, I've been thinking about an electric car, but, you know, I'm thinking, is that what I want? A whole nother big, huge product made of steel and everything. So I don't know. So I'm just living with what I've got and trying to ride these electric bikes we have now in town, and, you know, that kind of thing. And I just think it's nice to not have that judgment, and just trust that people will find their way. That's huge, isn't it? To just trust that people will find their way, and we can share in a loving way what we are doing. And I can see that spreading quite quickly as the new normal, you know, like, whoa, taking flights suddenly becomes sort of like, oh, you know, that's not so cool. And that doesn't mean we don't take them. It's just that it's sort of like wearing fur. Remember when people used to wear fur? And then there was a big movement about not wearing fur. And now it's just not cool to wear fur. I mean, people do, whatever. But I think that might be something that starts to happen. It's just not cool anymore.
Yeah.
And I think one of the really hard-hitting things that Sydney Banks, who Amy just explained at the beginning of this, one of the things he spoke about was, he said, I'm as much used to the world tending to my garden as what I am giving a talk to 100 people. Sid had seen the totality of consciousness. He knew that consciousness isn't an individual thing, it's a collective, it's a oneness. And him being in his good frame of mind, ultimately, he's adding to the well-being of the world. And there's this beautiful study, I think people are probably quite aware of it, the 100th monkey effect, is it called? Something like that, where they studied monkeys on, I think was it Polynesian islands or something, I can't remember which islands. But as they studied these monkeys, they happened to be there at a time when these monkeys evolved, or should I say evolved, had an insight into how to use a certain rock in a certain way to break open this fruit. And they noticed that at the same time as this one island that they were studying, the other islands' monkeys also had the realization at the same time, and they started this behavior. And they were calling it like the collective consciousness of the monkeys. And it's a fascinating thing when you start to get into the consciousness conversation. You start to recognize it's far more mysterious than what we can possibly think. But I really get the sense that as we start to open up our minds and open up our hearts and start looking in this direction, the rest of the 7.7 million other monkeys shaped as human beings will start to just open up their hearts and their minds and start looking in the direction as well. I really get the sense that just us being in ourselves and looking in this direction is so useful for the whole. So yeah, no, I love that, Beth. Billions. Billions of monkeys.
Go, Kim. Do you know how to unmute yourself? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, that would be really helpful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd
Hi
be helpful.
everyone.
Hi,
Hi.
Kim.
In my recently in the last 5 years, I know that I've actually just started to look at things differently, like going vegetarian. You know, it was like small little changes that all of a sudden it didn't make sense. And then, you know, so bit by bit, I can see that I've kind of changed and how I look at things has changed. And sometimes if I get into a lot of thinking about, oh my God, are we part of an insane asylum? When I see what some people are doing, and then in my head we're like, whoa, and then I'll have this disaster movie going off in my head. And then all of a sudden there's like this big wave that comes through me that goes, there has never been a time in our humanity where we can even speak, share something in a nanosecond, globally across the entire planet, this network of people speaking and that rising of that consciousness where, honestly, phones used to be attached to the wall. Now, in a nanosecond, something can change. So even now, when I look at this beautiful young Greta young lady that has been doing what she's been doing, and that voice has been heard amongst all the adult voice and all the noises, that child's voice came up and spoke and people heard, you know. So I see that as more and more that is going to happen. More and more, I have more and more faith that that is happening. There's so many people that hear that truth and that love. So when I look at just the mainstream media, I can see there's such a small percentage of people within that. And now with the expansion of just the internet the way it is, it's almost like divine, that it's all at the right time. So when I go into that, oh, what is going to happen? I kind of like, what can I do? Where's my space in this? So I know where my space is. So that gives me great hope that even when I'm working with young people or having a conversation with someone, you know, even in our groups, people have started changing. They're not buying plastic bottles. Yeah, now it's just like these really small things that we just chuck a little pebble out and something happens within it. Do you know what I mean? So I've just got this real faith that Divine Mind is just doing all this stuff that even we can't see, and that we're all part of that. And every time we show up with that love and understanding, that's what just gives me such hope. And then not looking at even though I know all this stuff that's happening, do you know what I mean? I see this stuff that's happening. There was this bigger part of me. There's loads more of people that are feeling the same thing. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'll go with it. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
That's really beautiful, Kim. And I want to jump in here because I think everything everyone has said has been so true and so right. And, you know, I think about 8 years ago, I had some insights about the amazing amount of material well-being that those of us who have time to get on a webinar, you know, and spend an hour and a half being groovy, you know, like it's an incredible abundance in terms of our comfort and our shelter and our food and our fresh water and our, you know, what we have, to the point of too much stuff, right? Too much food and so forth. And, you know, being involved with Extinction Rebellion, and also given the migrant crisis that we have in the States, in which Europe is also dealing with. And I don't know if there's anyone from other parts of the world, but that would be great to get more people from other parts of the world on this webinar. You know, I think it's important to keep in mind that there are people who are dying from the climate crisis now. And that's, so that doesn't mean we need to freak out. It just means that the context should be appropriate. for me. This is my view. And we've got 3 hosts and facilitators on this call, and the wisdom of the group. But that's something that's important for me to share. When I met Gangaji after Sydney Banks died, you know, I had this moment where I felt like, oh, I'm ready for another teacher. And I met Gangaji. And something she talks about is the privilege that we have. And it's the same use of the word privilege by activists, but when she said it, it was sort of like, you know, this gift that we have of time and space and comfort in which we can act and move. And so in a way, she sort of saw it as our responsibility to go into the spiritual, because that is what would be most helpful. And then from the spiritual comes our actions. You know, so for me, it's been becoming very active because I don't mind public speaking. I love it. I love to get out there. I love to raise a ruckus, and just like that's just a part of my personality. So I really feel like I've got all engines firing, or all something firing, you know, right now. And it feels like a good use of my skills and talents. But I also want to just interject that, you know, we are in a space of, we can be somewhat relaxed, whereas these migrants coming from Guatemala, you know, that are now, many of them dying, it's just something to put into our consciousness and then see how wisdom might compel us to respond. And so for me, the severity of the situation is calling me to act in a more sort of direct action way. But that's not for everyone. I don't know. I mean, some people could just be supporting activists and, you know, baking cookies and things for get-togethers, or people could just be sharing their lifestyles with others, their new lifestyles. Anyway, I'm gonna be quiet now. I just wanted to share that. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Hi, Sean here.
Hi.
Hi there. Hi. I'm listening, and I'm also conscious that I have some sort of internal conflict going on. So I just thought I'd share that. So I've been involved with the 3 Principles world for maybe 4 or 5 years. I've also been involved with the environmental and sustainability world for about 10 years. And I hear what people are saying. I hear what Dave, you said, you know, Sydney Banks said you can just as well do as much good in your garden looking after your plants that's going out. But I still have this thing about how can we maybe get some momentum around the understanding of the principles, connecting that with what's needed environmentally, and to make some sort of a step change. So I hear what people are saying, and I recognise that we do what we need to do, and we do what feels right for us at the moment, and we see where that happens. But yeah, I still have that conflict. and I guess a few years ago, I was involved with the One Solution conferences, and I did some One Solution workshops called One Solution for a Sustainable World. And it was interesting. We had lovely conversations with lovely people, but it was almost like the people who were there were the people who were already converted, if you like. And so that for me is the question. It's like, how can we, or what can I do that helps other people to see what's happening around the principles in the environment? And I don't know the answer, but that's just what's on my mind right now.
I mean, I'd like to respond to that, Sean. To me, it feels like this. I think we're in violent agreement. I think that's what this is about. But to me, anyway, I feel like coming together like this to have these conversations is. I know. I mean, I'm absolutely sure that was part of Amy's vision and Dave and Jen's when this conversation originally started. as Amy said a few times, we're busy applying the principles in leadership and business. Big part of what I do in schools, in other communities. Now we get to see what this has got to do with one of the biggest challenges that we face as a planet, as a species. So I feel like we're absolutely addressing the very thing that you're saying. And we don't know how that's going to unfold, because it is going to be an unfolding, and we're each going to feel called to whatever we feel called to do in terms of right action. So, I mean, I never thought I'd be in this conversation. So, how did that happen, right? I mean, apart from that Amy pinned me down when she came to visit me and didn't give me a choice. But of course I had a choice, right? I was already listening. There was something in my consciousness that was already open and wanting to hear something. And it's so interesting that I just find myself taking different actions and doing different things and making different choices. And it doesn't even feel like a conscious decision. It's just, I guess I've stopped. I guess we're not eating meat anymore. I mean, we talked about it a bit at home, but it wasn't sort of a big plan. It was, it felt very organic. And now it's a year and a half and we haven't eaten meat. And there's lots of things that have been changing, and we just keep having conversations at home. What do we want to do? This doesn't feel right anymore. Or I'll open my cupboard and I'll see products and I'll think, I'll just get a feeling. I'm like, I don't want that in my house anymore. Not because anyone said, I can't believe you've still got bleach and you're doing. It's just that things are just stopping. Things are no longer making sense to me that made sense before. And I know that's just consciousness doing its job of bringing me awareness in moments that I need it. It's not me doing it. So so I think that's just going to happen more and more. And there's so many amazing people around the world doing all kinds of incredible things. There's Amy's involved in all kinds of things, and Dave and Jen are doing their thing. So we're all going to be expressing this in our own way. And I think conversations like this are part of that step change. I really do. But what's been really important to me for this conversation, and I think we all have a slightly different view on this, is that I don't really want to be, and I don't think this is what we're going to be doing. I don't want to be telling people how to think and what to do. And I don't want people telling me how to think and what to do. I just want to be in a space of connection and reflection where things will just make sense to me, and then I will start to take action in ways that feel right, and we will all find our own place in the world for that. And I'm not part of the Extinction Rebellion thing. It's not calling to me right now, and I'm fine with that, because there's plenty of other people who are doing that. I don't know what my version of ER is going to be. I don't know. But that's why I'm part of this conversation and this community, because I feel very similar to you, I think.
And I think, Chantal, that one thing that you said that really strikes me is you didn't expect to be in this conversation. And I think that for me is like what I'm trying to find. I've got projects on at the moment around ethical fashion. And so I am trying to have conversations with the people who I call ethically curious. It's the people who know that there's something and they want to do something different. They know that something's not right, and how can I help them to make that change? And I guess that's, for me, it's like, how can we get to more people who are ethically curious? How can we help more people to, who are interested and care about the environment and the three principles understanding? And I guess, these conversations, absolutely, it's part of that, and I missed last week's, but there are different people on this one to the first week, and I get that, and the momentum, and there's a reference to a Facebook group, and all of that all helps. Absolutely. I guess I've just been trying to do this for a few years, and I want to have bigger scale change. Like the impact that Extinction Rebellion has had and is having is massive in the UK. You know, and I wonder if anybody's interested. I know we talked about this at early stages about helping people in Extinction Rebellion who are doing so much around the climate in terms of this understanding, whether there's more of us who want to get together to talk about three principles to that group of people, for example, so that we can almost do like a step change in terms of raising awareness of how the three principles and climate change, you know, absolutely fit together. I'm just being impatient. Well, I've been patient for years, and now I'm feeling like I don't want to be patient anymore. I don't want to just have conversations one-on-one. I want to have a big one. So yeah.
Well, you and Amy, two peas in a bloody pod then, aren't you, you two?
I really want to speak to that, but I know Nancy had her hand up, and so Nancy, I have a response to what is it, Cyan? Is that right?
Sean,
what Sean was saying.
Go ahead, Amy. Go ahead and respond. That's fine. It's all part of the flow. I'll come in when it's the right time.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Nancy's been one of my guardian angels here in Santa Cruz, I must say. Interestingly, you know, when we start to move with our passion, I can't say that I walk around like a Buddhist monk all the time, you know, like, oh, you know, I'm zenning out in front of Jimmy Panetta's office, and you know, I've been quite busy. I've been quite passionate. I've been quite motivated. I've been very energetic and sometimes very tired. And it's like I always have a check-in. And I love these Fridays because for me, I've set them aside as like, I'm not working, I'm not driving, I'm not running around like a crazy person Fridays. I'm resting, you know, I'm getting in touch with myself. I go for hikes. And but I do want to say that there's like sometimes in the principles world, a sense of we should always be zenned out. And a lot happened from me breaking down in tears at the church. Like that was huge. That provoked insight and conversations. And that was just authentic for me, you know. And there's something about just not honoring, but allowing our emotions to be a part of mind expressing without staying caught up in them or even caught up in the thinking that created them, but just part of this movement, you know, that we have around all of this, and not thinking we have to be zenned out always, and knowing that it's important to zen out, you know, to get regrounded. But what's happened as a result, Sean, of my efforts and sort of my journey, I don't even want to say efforts because it feels more just like I'm just moving around, is that I have volunteered to be on XR International Regenerative Culture Group. I don't know if I'll be accepted. I don't even know what the process is, but I'm involved in the US Regenerative Culture Dialogue and our Regenerative Culture Group here, as is Nancy for XR Santa Cruz. And what I'm seeing is how important it is to marry these two worlds. I'm also in the Jem Bendel's Deep Adaptation Group, and I brought up this webinar. I brought up the principles. Kimberly Haar is going to Jem's 2 or 3 day retreat I think it's in the Lake District actually. And Gail, is it Broadbrook of Extinction Rebellion fame? She's one of the founders. She has a wonderful spiritual sense of things. And there's something about that culture that XR has created. And I know it's not perfect, and I know it can feel edgy and so forth, which, you know, of course, civil disobedience will tend to have those elements. There's something about the culture in England that's been so attractive to people. And it's something that I can see my role, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to make sure that that's carried forward in the United States. So I'm just bridging a lot of worlds. And interestingly enough, this called for citizens' assemblies, which England is now starting to institute around the climate crisis and Extinction Rebellion demands, is happening here in the States in the form of something called wisdom councils, also in Austria. And just out of the blue, I got an email from the Wisdom Council people saying, our founder's in Santa Cruz. He's doing a 3-day training in dynamic facilitation, which is part of the Wisdom Council process. And we'd like to have a meeting with you. So I had suddenly 8 people at my house for lunch with Nancy talking about these wisdom councils, which are a form of deeply participatory democracy, which is obviously, in my mind, something we need. The problem here isn't, that we're just spewing CO2 into the atmosphere. The problem here is our level of consciousness, but two, frankly, I think that the mass level of consciousness is much higher than what we're experiencing, because the people who have power, like the fossil fuel industry, have sort of taken over our governmental systems and our democracies. That's my view. I'll speak for myself. And so we need a whole transformation of the system. And I've been like, geez, what does this mean? Citizens' assemblies, my God, this is frightening. What the hell is this? And what's this going to do? And the next thing I know, these wisdom council people are in town, showing up at city council meetings and talking about with great, here's the thing, right? Like they show up with a sense of presence. They show up with a sense of like a feeling of groundedness about what they're doing. And that's the marriage, isn't it, of what we can do as activists or as human beings trying to lead the way in some fashion. That's the key. And I think that's what this webinar is also about, is how do we sort of move in that sense of presence. Even if we get emotional sometimes, there's a gravitational pull, isn't there, to people who have that sense of presence about them. So there's all these interconnections that I'm seeing, Sean, that are super cool. And I've just found getting involved in these groups helps me to be a conduit between them. A lot of what I'm doing is just cross-fertilization right now. And it's been super cool. It's been happening really quickly over here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I need to do more of the cross-fertilization, as you call it.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable doing that?
I do, and I have had conversations. Before Extinction Rebellion, the fracking was a big issue here, and we had, I work with the fracking activists here to think about how can we talk about what we're for and what we love, and what is the wisdom in us as opposed to what we're against. And it feels like the similar conversation now with some of the people I know in Extinction Rebellion. Others that I know in Extinction Rebellion are more spiritual, and they get that, but it's just need to get more involved with that, I think. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll jump in at this point. The Extinction Rebellion starts with Tell the Truth. And one of my young colleagues here that Amy knows, and who actually was the first in Santa Cruz to stand up, stop traffic, get himself arrested, Tyler Maldonado, has again and again says, we owe each other the truth, no matter how painful it is. It's an act of respect, especially for young people. We have to be telling each other what I call the truth, too terrible to tell, of what is going on in the world, because only then can we step into the space that is needed. But the other thing I find myself saying is we need to tell the whole truth. And the whole truth isn't just about the terrible things that are going on, the destruction that we're creating in the biological world, and the things that are wrong in our society that are producing that destruction. The whole truth is the three principles. The whole truth is recognizing that people all over the world are stepping up to this challenge and coming up with an enormous range of responses, both spiritual and practical. And part of understanding, someone was saying earlier, we can't be telling people what to think, but what we are doing is posing questions for us to think about together, recognizing that we're in this struggle together. No one of us has the answer. We're not imposing the answers on each other, but we are raising the questions with each other. And part of the truth is to realize not only are people doing things around the world, but there are dramatic citizen successes, if you will, proofs of concept that show what we are capable of doing, so that our spirit working through us makes the hope we have fully grounded. And the range of responses across all the different professions. I keep saying that the difficulty is it's not oppositional. We're not up against something in particular. We risk finding ourselves fighting each other. But that's where the no blame, no shame comes in. Instead, what we are is recognizing that we are, all of us, vulnerable, caught in this system, and finding our way out together so that we regard each other and ourselves with great compassion, and at the same time determination, recognizing that there actually are ways out. And just in the same sense, we're all part of the problem. We're also all part of the solution. And it's not just in our household behaviors, our behaviors as consumers, our behaviors as voters, but in each of our professions, there are, often at the margins, better ways of doing things that can change the profession. I think, for example, of one of the first respondents to all of this was the American Institute of Architecture, which early on started building into its professional standards about issues of sustainability. So I want our witness to be in Extinction Rebellion, and whenever we are sharing with each other the painful truths of what we're up against, to also be sharing the truths of what we have working for us, and that finding our particular distinctive part, that we have talents. We are, as Amy's been pointing out, with privilege. We are in different situations, different positions. We have different passions and concerns. The thing is to recognize how these things are connected and name that for each other, so that we are encouraging the distinctive contributions and talents of each person, but with the recognition that these are all interconnected ways that we change. Systems change is such a big notion. There's so much complexity. But the very fact that we're all part of the system and part of the problem makes us also all potentially part of the solution. And to encourage that in each other by asking really good questions of each other. And then the other piece of it that I personally am really committed to is I'm finding dozens of examples from all over the world of the most successful efforts to not only do the right thing, but to change systems in the course of doing that. And always circling back to how it must be grounded in the best part of ourselves, and encouraging that in each other. One of my colleagues, Christine Barrington, keeps saying it always begins with the quality of our relationships. And she quotes Otto Scharmer as saying that the intervention can be no better than the intervener. So this soul work that we're doing together is where right action comes from, as one of you wrote into the text message a while ago. And at the same time, it manifests in very practical terms by sharing concrete stories with each other of what soul-driven success looks like in politics, in money, investment, how teaching is done, how students standing up across the entire, all sectors, all sections, have a role to play. And when we name that for each other, it legitimizes what I call do-it-ourselves democracy, because governance is throughout the whole land. It's not just concentrated in the handful of people we hire to do our bidding by voting for them. I guess I'll stop there.
I'd love for us to, sorry, this is an offline conversation, but I actually think that, we're going to be a growing community. I'd love some of these examples, these stories that you are talking about, Nancy, without being explicit. I'd love somehow for us to be able to get hold of those and share those through our Light on the Horizon page. I don't know whether that will be appropriate, but I just think it's something to have in mind, because it feels incredibly inspiring, for me at least, And I've mentioned here so I love everything you said. I could listen to you all day, by the way. So
If I could just quickly, practical comment. I'm right here with Amy, and I had pulled together one V-series last year on these things, and I'm pulling together materials here. I have about a dozen people working with me to put these into forms that make them immediately usable in very practical ways. And I will definitely not only be sharing them with Amy and others in XR here, but really seeking their input and engagement. And I see that as part of what we may contribute to the whole regenerative culture movement, is to see ourselves engaged in this way. But I promise, I am committed to you all to put this in forms that you can make use of and then further share, further develop, and grow this. So thanks for that invitation.
And I've also mentioned here, but it's not very clear. So just to say that B Corp is I think a really important organization in this bigger picture, because, you know, their mantra is, you know, we are what free trade is to coffee, we are to business. So if you're a business and you get that's what they say, I think. If you get the certificate, or maybe I made that up, it's pretty good, but I think they said it. If you get the B Corp certification, you're basically an organization, a business, a profit business, not for non-profit. Yes. It's for profit-only businesses who have to go through a rigorous certification process.
Yes.
And a number of boxes that includes ethics and transparency and sustainability and CO2. You know, just there's a raft of things, and so it's a very rigorous set of criteria. But there are a growing number of organizations signing up to B Corp, and I feel like that I'm just very excited about what they're doing in the world of business. And you're a B. Okay, Sean, we have to talk.
Okay,
yeah, we need to talk. All right, good. See, so this is how stuff happens. Yay! So exciting. I love it.
There's an old comment from, I'm a Quaker, and the history of Quakers, that they say in the New World, they came to do good and ended up doing well. And this notion of doing well by doing good is the true prophet.
There are some folks who haven't spoken up. Christian, Vera, Matt, I'm not sure if you've been with us before. We'd love to hear from you. Tim, you know, maybe you don't want to speak up, but if you'd like to join on the conversation with any thoughts at all, even criticisms are welcome, because then we get to address them. Just enjoying the listening for now. Thanks. Cool. Hi, yeah, is that, it says Matt, but it looks like it's George, yeah?
It's George. I'm sorry, I came in right at the end, so I missed the first bit, and I was cooking with my son, so I was kind of hearing bits of it, but it was very inspiring, and I just wanted to say thank you. And I look forward to catching up on it on YouTube as well. But I guess what I was coming to me, it's funny, it's like, it can seem very overwhelming. And when you forget about the principles, it can seem very overwhelming. And in fact, I went to like an interfaith, like get to know your neighbors thing, and people chose topics that they were passionate about, and I sat on the table about the environment, and it was quite interesting because the older people on the table were saying, oh, it's up to the government, and the younger people, like 40 under, were saying it's up to us, which was quite interesting. And so that gave me hope, and I just remembering, just like you do with the principles, just to follow your feeling and just take one step at a time. And even though I was like confronted by bits of the conversation I heard, inside me was saying, will you just see, you know, like Chantal was saying, see the bits around the house. And now it's funny, I've really noticed it's coming into my consciousness. I see more and more plastic around my house, and it can be very overwhelming to look at your whole house, but then you have to start somewhere, right? So I think it's very helpful, and I'm sorry I only got the end and today, but I will try and catch up. Thank you.
It's interesting. Jen and I, we did a talk at a place in London that does a lot of work with the three principles. And they said, what do you want your topic to be? And we said, the environment. And the response was, well, we don't know how many people you're going to get. You know, if you were putting out a conversation about depression, anxiety, anger, eating disorders, you fill the room. But when it comes to the environment, we don't know how many people you're going to get. And we had a really small gathering. Seven people we had. And we had a few people online, and it's such an interesting thing. But you can see where people's consciousness is. You know, at the moment, what the world is facing at this very present moment in time, it is facing a problem whereby humanity is so lost and consumed by its own ego. It's like people are very self-focused. You know, I haven't got time to think about the bloody environment. I've got depression, I've got anxiety, I've got this, I've got that. And people don't feel like they've got the energy to, or many people don't feel like they've got the energy to even consider looking in another direction, because they're too busy just trying to get through their day-to-day lives. And I've got a lot of empathy for those people. I've been there and I've done that, and it really isn't a nice place to live. But again, mental sanity, you know, mental health is absolutely key to, and addressing the mental health crisis is absolutely key to addressing the environmental crisis. The two are not separate, the two are one. As people, I'll just reiterate, as people start to find the balance within themselves, they naturally are more inclined to have more wise thinking. You know, insight, the beautiful gift of insight, this phenomenal happening that happens within the consciousness of beings, whereby new inspiration is literally birthed into the consciousness of somebody. And then it goes out to the world. We're all part of this infinite knowledge that underpins that created the environment and the planet and ourselves in the first place. That's what we all are. So it's a beautiful thing to start to know that as we start to help people, the people who are involved with the three principles, beautiful, you're helping to raise people's consciousness. The people who are going out and doing whatever they want to do, it's helping raise people's consciousness. And if there's one thing Sydney Banks did say, he never told people what to think, but he always said, if you want to change the world, you have to change the consciousness of humanity. And this is a fundamental thing.
One of the things that was occurring to me is the amount of awareness that's been brought to this through the Blue Planet and David Attenborough. And it's almost like so many people who had almost, it seems like he's made it really accessible for people in the way that he's delivered it. And it kind of feels like I've loved being able to have my sense of the principles, because sometimes the things that come to you, like you recognize your own ego and your own part to play. It's very easy to blame other people or to blame big business or politicians, but it's like I feel like this really does allow you to take responsibility and kind of see what in your own life could change. What can I do? And I think there has been times I've kind of been quite uncomfortable when I've recognized things in my life that I hadn't seen before, but then the principles allows you to view that in a way where it isn't judgmental and it isn't blame. It's and then what? And being open to that insight. But I think so much of this is, and we've said with this webinar was really about, we're going to make sure we have links and resources and things that people practically can do, because it can feel so overwhelming, but it's nice to have the sense of the principles, and then there's all these ideas that people are having about how they can help and how they can serve, and people wanting to support and people wanting to connect, and it's like we're so much stronger together. And like we had a chat with Sian when I saw she'd written something under one of the posts, and it's like seeing her passion and some of the things that she's been part of, it drew my attention to things that I didn't know before. And it comes back to you don't know what you don't know. So it's allowing people to find peace within themselves and then that right action. But unless you know, you don't know there's anything to do. And so many people we've come across have said, I don't know where I've been, but I didn't know about this crisis. And it's suddenly come into their awareness and they're shocked. But it's been kind of cool to see that they haven't then buried their head in the sand again. they've been moved. So I feel like these two worlds are just so, they're one. And I think it's beautiful that this is coming together, and just listening to everyone today, I feel so inspired and hopeful.
Yeah.
And I've just seen that Nancy has her hand up, so you're gonna unmute yourself.
Just a very short, quick point. It's my sense that the reason so many people choose distraction and turning away from this isn't self-centeredness or the greed that has been goaded into them by marketing and so forth. It's rather their utter sense of hopelessness and helplessness. They have no idea really what to do. It's this huge problem. They look around, it seems like even the leadership in the world doesn't have any answers at all. So to the extent that we can be putting out stories of all the different ways that things are changing and can change, I think that opens up a willingness to engage that may not otherwise be there.
When the impossible starts to look possible.
I don't know if I
exactly so. Yeah.
One of the other calls, but I think I did. But when in Cape Town, they had not had enough rain for years. So they were getting to the point where they were told, you know, day zero when they're going to run out. And suddenly, like, everyone came together, and what they managed to achieve is that they pushed it back. So by the day that they were supposed to have completely run out, they hadn't. And then by the time the rains came, and there's like the things, it was ingenious what people were coming up with and how they came together. And I felt so inspired by that. Yeah. And it's like, it meant we started taking way shorter showers, just silly things like that. But it's like, we started to see the use of water and how we just don't even think about it. We're so lucky we just turn on a tap and it's there, and we're in the Lake District and there's loads of rain. So why do we have to worry about water? But being in Cape Town during that crisis, and seeing everyone coming together and seeing all these ingenious things and seeing people using their shower water to put on the garden and all those kind of,
put down the toilet.
But it hadn't been in my awareness so much before. But it's
like, you know, we humans we're the biggest problem makers, but we're also the best problem solvers. We got both things going.
Yeah. There's more everyday citizens than what there is big companies. And, you know, as the everyday citizens' consciousness changes, the big companies will have to change, because the only reason the big companies are big is because people plow their money into it. And one of the things I remember hearing Russell Brand say was, you vote with every single penny you spend, whether you keep something alive or you let it die. And it was such a poignant thing for us, because at that point we went home, didn't we? And we looked up who is the most, we drive a diesel vehicle. We can't afford an electric vehicle. We'd really, really love to, but we can't. But we then started to look into who are the most ethical fuel companies, and what came out top in the UK at that point, which was last year, was Merco. Who came out worst was Esso, part of Exxon. So it's like we started to then look for the more ethical, the more decent. We started to put our money where our mind is, where our mouth is, and we started to make that kind of simple change adds up. You know, if every single person, I just want to, people talk about not eating meat. I just want to kind of expand on why not eat meat. And it's not, I don't feel like, for me personally, it's not about as much as it's an ethical thing. I personally, my personal feeling is I don't want to consume another mammal or bird or anything like that. I would sooner consume something that produces a fruit and can continue to live as best I possibly can. But I think more so for the environment, the vast majority of the greenhouse gases apparently come from cattle and livestock, where they produce so much methane, and methane is something like 12 times more heat gathering than carbon dioxide. And the vast swathes of the rainforest are being cut down to grow soy. And this is in turn being fed back to the animals to breed livestock for meat. So it is one of the most environmentally destructive food sources, regardless of whether we think it's ethical to eat an animal or not. That's apparently what's going on for the planet as a whole. So when we're talking about eating meat, it's not just about whether it's ethical to eat an animal, but it's the impact that the meat industry is actually having on the planet. I think that's
but I
just
also
something.
know a lot of people have just said, oh, I went from having it every day to maybe once a week.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not telling people what to do, but
No.
it's like, you didn't know that before.
I didn't have a clue.
It just hadn't occurred to you. So it's like bringing things into people's awareness and then them getting quiet and what makes sense to them. And I think it's really important to keep saying that, because I wouldn't want people to feel that we are telling them what to do, but it's almost like, unless you know, you don't know. And that's what I keep coming back to.
So it's 20% to 100 times more methane is powerful than CO2 as a heating aid. Okay, so between 20 to 100 times more potent than carbon dioxide, which is a big old thing, really.
It's I've seen 20 and I've seen 100 times in the literature and in the journals and so forth, and so I tend to go with 20. That's still quite a lot. And I just wanted to add, if it's all right, to this conversation, because I see my role sometimes, not always, as expanding the consciousness of what's okay to be doing from a three principles grounding perspective, because it's okay to be doing anything at all. That's something I think that's been a theme of my whole career. And I have gotten some pushback from colleagues around the activism. And, I know that no one's really thinking this way, but there was a comment where I thought it could be like, well, we don't want to blame and shame the corporations. Well, it depends, doesn't it? Like, it would just be like sort of what looks like the right thing to do for us. And the idea that ExxonMobil and Shell have put out alternative science for 30 years to confuse the issue and create all kinds of weird, bizarre conspiracy theories about why, Al Gore is promoting this idea of climate change because he's funded by the Russians. Or Al Jazeera, just insanity. Like, it's a kind of sociopathy that is hard to fathom when, you live in a world of mental health and well-being as sort of your default. So, and the reason I'm saying this is because when I look at someone like Gandhi or Martin Luther King, they were very clear that every human being had the capacity for love and for understanding. And at the same time, they were very clear about what was wrong with what was being done by the government, by the police forces, and they spoke it. And so I just want to sort of be that voice, and I just love that we have these three different voices and more now on this webinar, because I've gotten some pushback on that from Three Principles people who are quoting Ramana, for example, Ramana, who's just sort of just be and don't be in resistance and yeah, I love Ramana. I have like 5 Ramana books at my house, Ramana Maharshi. And when I looked into the books about what Ramana said about Gandhi, Ramana was living in Gandhi's era, and he said throughout his talks, Gandhi is moving according to his dharma. There's no worry about Gandhi. Gandhi's just moving, and he supported that. So I'm just throwing that out there because
I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think another thing in the principles community, there's this big thing, you don't do this, the principles, and I feel like people confuse there's nothing to do with do nothing. And so I think Sid never told anybody, don't do anything in life. He said, go and live and go and engage and be a fully engaged, awake participant in life. And I think that is it's a beautiful thing, Amy. A lot of people do think that we just need to just. There's a beautiful story I once heard, and it was a Sydney Banks talk, and he spoke about fate. And he spoke about how he saw this thing on telly about some Indian guru, and this Indian guru was talking about how all these poor people were giving him money, and he had all these Rolls Royces, and he said, well, this interviewer said, how can you do that? And he's just said, well, that's these people's fate. And what Sid was speaking about was, yeah, well, fate is up until this moment, but the future is an infinite potential. What's happened now, you know, we can learn from the past, and we can go out and we can create a new future because it's not written. You know, what we predict now isn't a given. We can change this world. We can change ourselves, and we can change the world. Fate is what is happening at this very present moment in time, but the future is not written. So it's like to start to see that, you start to realize that anything's possible, and the coming together, the simple coming together of 14 people on a Zoom call like this, who then go out and they speak to 3 or 4 people, who then go out and speak to 3 or 4 people. It's like there's a fire that gets started, and it spreads just simply through vocabulary and connection. So and this isn't just the only thing that's going on. There's things going on all over the world. The consciousness of humanity is rising, and it cannot be stopped. Once it's set fire, it cannot be stopped. It's happening. I'm optimistic personally. I'm optimistic. This way, when Amy came up, she said, "I've got this title, Light on the Horizon. What do you think?" I was like, I love it, because I do believe there's light on the horizon. I am not a doom monger in any way whatsoever. The consciousness of humanity is the most phenomenal power. When it's pointed in a direction, it can shift shit. It really can. And I believe it will.
Richard, let's see, am I muted or what? Oh, here we go. Richard, you've had your hand up.
Yeah. One of the one of the important things as everybody moves forward, it seems to me, is to be as trauma informed as possible, because that is a lot of what's confronting us as we respond to the situation on the globe. And fortunately, over the last 30 years, there's been a huge increase in our understanding, our fundamental knowledge about trauma. One of the things that that I've been working on is tapping into some of the deep work that's been done in recent years about the psychology of the climate chaos. And there's been some really amazing work and research done on that. I'm also, part of my work is networking around the planet regarding providing bioregional climate trauma services. As people begin to wake up about climate chaos and biospheric collapse, becoming more and more informed, a lot of people will be experiencing, it seems, a kind of panic, especially the more denial has played into this. And part of our response, part of our activism, I feel, needs to be providing trauma-informed responses to our neighbors, our communities, people at work, and educating ourselves, because the science of trauma, the neurobiology of trauma, and all of its complexity plays into as a driver of climate chaos and also of our response to it. And this is a big part of my own work and my organizing or networking and whatever you want to call it regarding these issues. So this is just something that I'd like to suggest is an important thing, especially with spiritual responses. With a lot of spiritual communities, there has been perhaps inadvertently a lot of traumatic experience because the spiritual communities have not been well enough informed about the nature of psychological trauma, the nature, what constitutes abuse, and what types of human behavior can create spiritual trauma, and which is a bear to help people when a person has been traumatized at their spiritual depths. That's that's really challenging to provide help for. So this is a dimension of the situation that I think we need to keep conscious of as in moving forward. So that's what I wanted to share.
I know we're getting to the end of the hour, but Richard, you brought up something so huge, and that is the trauma that I see now in my community here on the West Coast, where we have fresh water and food. I meet a lot of people who can't sleep at night now, and this is going to add tremendously to what people are already saying is a mental health crisis. And so the response that we can bring as healers, as practitioners, I think is huge. Like the need is going to be, it's huge now, and it's just going to get bigger. But this is one of the purposes of this webinar, actually, is we hope that people can get on who are suffering with that now in the context of the facts, meaning we're not coming from a spiritual place of, oh, just, it's all good, because we understand what the facts are. I don't share an optimistic view. I don't share a pessimistic view. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that we can be okay regardless. And that, I think, is a very important message to share. And I think that perhaps if you could join us on the next webinar to bring up the idea of trauma, and I'm not sure what you mean by spiritual trauma, but that's something that we should sort of break down a little bit for people, because the principles will have a way of addressing that, and we need to be clear and not just say, it's beautiful what you've said, what you've brought to the table, spiritual trauma, but let's see what that is and how the principles can apply to that, so that these webinars, which are going on YouTube, right, can be immediately helpful to people who may be suffering from that. And the spiritual community, to me, has a responsibility, this is just my opinion, right now, to face the facts fully. And then if they have the true spiritual oomph, the juice, to be able to help, then they should be opening up their doors for that kind of assistance. They don't have to go out and be activists. They don't have to do, but if a spiritual community is meant to be supportive of people spiritually and emotionally. And so that's sort of another one of my efforts, is like, people don't have to run out into the middle of the street or do stuff like that. If they want to, fantastic. We welcome them with open arms. Come on. It's actually quite a lot of fun, but it's brilliant. I love it. But
and runway would be better. That would be really impressive.
Yeah. Well, it's starting to happen. Anyway, so I could go on and on, but you see my comment too. Let's just start creating a network of healers. It's already happening in Santa Cruz. People are stepping up to the plate. With every month, they're willing to contribute an hour. Every week, they're willing to contribute an hour. Let's say, let's put that message out to the Three Principles community. I'm willing to lead that charge. So my email, I'll put my email in. Just send me an email.
Amy?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually on my own website is soon to go up, deals with burnout for activists specifically. Yeah.
I have a technical question. With all the wonderful things going into the chat box, is that going to disappear when the chat is over, when our webinar is over?
No, when we save the recording, it does give you the transcript. So we need to make sure as a team we keep that transcript, and we share anything on the page we need to share, and we act on anything that we've talked about that we need to act on. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Thank you. Thanks. Could I add just one thing? I was thinking earlier when there was some discussion about the, burnout and other things. The two words that just came to me were empathy and energy. And I think one of the huge causes or underpinning structures of trauma is if you feel like you're the only one who it's happening to, or the only one who's saying, what's wrong with me? Everybody's having a wonderful time, but I can smell smoke, right? So I think providing like this webinar, and then when it goes out onto YouTube, part of the snowball that happens is, you know, I think it's just, for me, the most powerful sentence in the universe, which is, no shit, you too. When we think we're alone, and we're absolutely not. So that gives this window of awareness. But then, so that's the empathy. But then the energy is to know that those same people are the ones you can go to when you're burned out and you're fed up. And, you know, I don't even care. I don't even care. I'm going to go joyriding in my car, smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey, you know, like whatever. When you're at the end of your rope, to have a place to come to like this, where you can say, I'm at the end of my rope, I can't take it anymore. And the response, rather than fixing you or helping you or judging you, is, you know, I think a cup of tea might help. And total acceptance. And then I get re-energized by seeing humor in people who have every reason to be as burned out as I am, but they're just not, because we take turns being burned out. So, you know, I think the building of community starts with, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And then you can dive into the pool. And then when you're exhausted, there are people there who, boy, did they understand the exhaustion. But for some reason now they're okay again. So I get to see living examples of resilience, like Sid talked about, you know, this innate resilience we have that I lose faith in when I happen to be running low. But then it comes back, usually with an infusion of humor, we'll do it. So yeah, I think we're more powerful than we know.
And Bobby and others, I just want to add, my experience at this point is the quality of relationships that are growing out of working with people in this movement are probably the most powerful, clear, grounded, loving, vulnerable, all of those things. We're so focused, it just shifts the energy of the relationships. And that's one of the things that gives me the most hope.
Chantal was thinking that go ahead. Sorry, it was just.
No, I think this has been a wonderful conversation, and I feel like we've really got something important going on here, not in an earnest way, but just in a genuinely generative way. And I feel like as different people come into these conversations, we bring another dimension, we get different perspectives, and it's just very rich. It feels very nourishing for me, very rich, very nourishing, and yeah, really inspiring, really inspiring. So thank you, everyone who's been here and contributed. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. And thank you, Amy. Thank you, Chantal.
Thanks, guys. Love you all.
Loads of love, everybody. Take care.
Love you all. Have a lovely weekend.